My name is Lucy. I'm 24 years old. And just last year, I achieved something I've been working toward since I was a teenager. I bought my very first house. It should have been a celebration of everything I sacrificed and worked for. But that victory was clouded when my own mother stood in my backyard and accused me of stealing my brother's future. A week later, the situation spiraled into something I never imagined possible. Legal papers arrived in the mail, and I discovered my parents were suing me for the home I had purchased with my own hard-earned money. If you've ever had family try to diminish your achievements or take credit for your success, you'll understand the sting of betrayal I felt. But this story isn't just about what was taken from me, it's also about what I built through sheer determination, and how I discovered that the best revenge really is living low. I grew up in Millfield, a small town in the Midwest where everyone knew everyone else's business. On the surface, my family seemed ordinary enough. My dad, Thomas, was an accountant at a local firm, while my mom, Diane, managed the household with strict rules and an appetite for appearances. But behind closed doors, the family dynamic was always the same. My younger brother, Kevin, was the golden child, and I was the shadow in the corner. From as early as I can remember, my accomplishments were weighed against his potential. When I brought home straight A's, my parents would nod and say, "That's fine. But did you see Kevin's winning goal at soccer last week?" When I proudly carried home my science fair ribbon, the praise quickly shifted to Kevin's invitation to a birthday party at the mayor's house. It didn't matter what I achieved. Somehow, Kevin's future promise always outshone my present reality. I'll never forget one particular day in 10th grade. Sitting at our worn kitchen table, I nervously asked my parents if they could help cover the $300 fee for an honors trip to Washington, D.C. My history teacher had personally recommended me for the program. The silence that followed felt heavy, like a curtain dropping. Without looking up from his newspaper, my dad finally said, "We're saving for Kevin's future. College isn't cheap, and he has real potential." I whispered, "What about my future?" My mother sighed as if I was being unreasonable. "Lucy, you're smart. You'll figure something out." That night, I cried into my pillow, but by morning, something hardened inside me. If my parents wouldn't invest in me, then I would invest in myself. I vowed that I would never again rely on them financially. The very next afternoon after school, I marched into every business in town and asked for work. By sunset, I had secured my first job, waiting tables at Darlene's Diner. Darlene, the owner, was a tough but kind woman who became one of the first adults outside. My teachers to recognize my determination. Those first months were brutal. I'd go from school straight to the diner, work until closing, then stay up late trying to finish homework. My grades slipped at first, which my parents immediately criticized, but I adjusted. I gave up my social life, taught myself to live on 6 hours of sleep, and managed to maintain my academic standing while working nearly 30 hours a week. On my 16th birthday, instead of asking for gifts, I walked into the local credit union and opened my very first bank account. The teller was surprised when I insisted no parental names be added, but I made it clear I was serious. I will never forget the feeling of staring at my first savings statement with $1,000 in it. That money wasn't just paper, it was freedom. When my mother noticed I had started buying my own clothes and supplies, she scoffed. "The stubbornness is getting old, Lucy. We're your parents. This is our job." I replied calmly, "You made it clear where the family resources go. I'm just respecting that decision." My response infuriated her, but what could she argue? That she was upset I wasn't a financial burden? That diner job turned into more than just a paycheck. One of our regulars, Mr. Patterson, was a retired financial advisor. He noticed me one slow afternoon reading a personal finance book I borrowed from the library. From then on, he started sharing advice about saving, credit, and investing. His words stuck with me far more than anything I was learning in class. Most people your age think about how to spend money, he told me one day. You're already thinking about how to grow it. That mindset is your greatest advantage. By my senior year of high school, I had mastered the balancing act. I was working nearly 30 hours a week while keeping a GPA, just shy of 4.0. I had learned how to live on discipline, coffee, and the knowledge that no one was coming to rescue me. My future was in my own hands. When graduation came, I walked across the stage with nearly $10,000 in my savings account and a partial scholarship to State University. That money meant freedom, even if my parents didn't see it that way. They threw a joint graduation party for me and Kevin. The reality, though, was that the entire event revolved around him. Kevin was only finishing his junior year with barely passing grades. Yet the slideshow featured picture after picture of his sports moments, his parties, his smiles. My graduation felt like a footnote, and even the cake read, "Congratulations, Lucy," and future star Kevin. I smiled, but deep down, I knew what really mattered, my bank account and the independence it represented. State University wasn't my dream school, but it was affordable. Between the scholarship and state tuition and my savings, I calculated that I could make it work as long as I kept working. While other freshmen spent orientation week decorating dorms or going to parties, I was filling out job applications. I kept my weekend job at Darlene's, driving 2 hours back to Millfield every Friday. And I picked up another job at the campus library that fit my class schedule, but my housing situation was rough. I lived in a 5-bedroom house crammed with 6 other students. My room was actually a converted sunroom with no proper insulation, so winters were freezing. But at $350 a month, all utilities included, it was the cheapest option, and I made it work. Thrift store curtains and layers of sweaters kept me from freezing at night. Meanwhile, back home, my parents gifted Kevin a brand new car to help with his college applications. The irony wasn't lost on me as I waited in the rain at bus stops, clutching my worn backpack, despite the challenges. I found my tribe at college among other students who were also juggling jobs and studies. We swapped shifts for each other during exams, shared used textbooks, and celebrated little victories like free pizza at campus events. Lisa, a girl in my statistics class, became my closest friend after we bonded over our similar schedules, 2 jobs and full course loads. Some people spend college partying, she once told me, but we're building something bigger. And I knew she was right. The contrast between my life and Kevin's only grew sharper once he enrolled at Westfield University, a pricey private college. My parents somehow managed to pay his tuition in full. His social media was filled with fraternity parties, trips, and vacations while I was working 60 hours a week. Just to stay afloat. Phone calls with my parents became increasingly rare. Whenever we spoke, my mother gushed about Kevin's networking opportunities or his lacrosse achievements. Then she'd ask me, "Have you joined any clubs, Lucy?" As if I had time for anything beyond classes and work. It was during my sophomore year that something clicked. I discovered a passion I didn't even know I had: real estate. It started with an urban economics class taught by Professor Jenkins, a former developer turned academic. She saw something in me and encouraged my endless questions after class. Most students see real estate as just buildings, she told me. You see patterns, both mathematical and human. That's rare. With her encouragement, I packed my schedule with summer classes while working full-time at a property management company. Some nights, I was so exhausted that I broke down crying, questioning if all the sacrifice was worth it. But every time I pictured depending on my parents, who had made it clear where their loyalty lay, I pushed forward. By junior year, The strain with my family was undeniable. Thanksgiving dinner turned into 20 minutes of Kevin bragging about his alumni networking events before anyone asked how I was doing. When I mentioned my internship with Horizon Realty, a respected firm in the capital city, my mother simply nodded, then changed the subject back to Kevin's lacrosse team. Christmas was worse. Kevin unwrapped piles of expensive gifts, electronics, designer clothes, even ski equipment for a trip my parents planned for him. My gift, a clearance rack sweater with the tag still half attached. I wore it with a smile, but inside, the contrast was unbearable. That spring, everything began to change. I landed a coveted internship at Horizon Realty, working under Terry Maxwell, one of the most respected agents in the state. The pay was good enough that I could cut back slightly on my hours at the library, giving me just enough space to breathe. Terry taught me what textbooks couldn't: how to negotiate, evaluate property, and understand what really makes a home valuable. It was Terry who first introduced me to the idea of first-time homebuyer programs. She looked me directly in the eye one day after reviewing my savings and said, "If you're smart and strategic, you could own your first property by 25, maybe even sooner." That single sentence lit a fire in me. Publicly, I set the goal of owning a home by 25. Privately, I aimed for 24. From then on, every decision I made was weighed against that target. Spring break vacations, skipped new clothes, thrifted meals out, replaced with bulk meal preps. Graduation came sooner than I expected. True to form, my parents didn't show up. My mother called a couple of weeks before to explain they couldn't attend because Kevin had a lacrosse tournament that might attract professional scouts. I accepted her excuse with my usual forced grace, while my closest friends, especially Lisa, celebrated with me instead. What my parents never cared to ask was that I was graduating with a business degree, a minor in finance, minimal student debt, and a full-time job offer from Horizon Realty already secured. Moving the tassel from right to left, I wasn't just finishing school. I was stepping fully into a self-made future. Starting full-time at Horizon, I continued as Terry's assistant, but my previous internship experience fast-tracked me. 6 months in, I passed my real estate license exam and started managing my own clients under Terry's guidance. Meanwhile, the dream of owning a home remained front and center. I rented a tiny studio apartment, just 400 square feet, with a kitchenette so small I could touch both walls with my hands. The building had endless maintenance problems and paper-thin walls, but the rent was $500 below market value. That savings went straight into my house fund. My furniture consisted of a futon, a desk I found on the curb, and a couple of folding chairs. My mother would have cringed at the austerity, but I smiled every time I transferred money into my savings account to accelerate my progress. I started a side hustle helping graduate students and young professionals find apartments. I couldn't legally collect commissions yet without running it through Horizon, but I charged consultation fees for creating personalized apartment search lists. Word of mouth spread quickly, and before long, I was working late nights and weekends, juggling both real estate clients and my growing side business. One evening, Terry found me in the office at 8 p.m., still buried in paperwork. She shook her head and said, "You're going to burn out. Lucy, you don't need to sprint. You've got a whole career ahead of you." But when I explained my goal of homeownership, she didn't lecture. Instead, she introduced me to Sandra Wilson, a senior agent known for her expertise in investment properties. Sandra became my second mentor, teaching me how to spot undervalued houses, understand appreciation patterns, and build wealth through equity. Sandra's words stuck with me. Don't just find clients, become your own best client first. By 23, I had built up my savings faster than I'd ever imagined. 6 months ahead of schedule, I had enough for a down payment, closing costs, and a small emergency reserve. The search for the right house was exhausting. I toured 27 properties before finding the one, a dated 1960s ranch with 3 bedrooms, avocado green kitchen cabinets, pink bathroom tile, and wood paneling everywhere. Most buyers walked away, but I saw what others missed: a solid foundation, a new roof, and a spacious backyard in a neighborhood just starting to revitalize. The asking price stretched my budget, but armed with research and comparable sales data, I put in an offer 12% under asking. After some negotiation, we settled at 7% below, contingent on inspection. The elderly sellers, moving into a retirement community, were touched by the letter I wrote explaining my journey to home ownership. They accepted. 2 months after my 24th birthday, I sat in a title office signing papers with trembling hands. When the agent told me, "Don't worry, everyone feels nervous buying their first house," I smiled through tears. "I'm not nervous," I told her. "I'm proud." Moving in was almost comical. My handful of belongings barely filled the space, and the house echoed with emptiness. But slowly, with thrifted furniture and Saturday DIY projects, it became mine. Every weekend, I painted walls, refinished cabinets, and installed new fixtures with the help of YouTube tutorials and hardware store workshops. Piece by piece, that outdated ranch became a home. The day I signed the closing documents for my house, I thought the hardest part was over. But really, it was just the beginning of the life I'd been building toward since I was 16. At first, the house felt enormous and empty. My tiny futon, thrift store desk, and folding chairs barely filled the space, and my footsteps echoed against the bare walls. But I wasn't discouraged. I was excited. Every weekend became project day. With the help of online tutorials, I painted cabinets, replaced light fixtures, and learned to refinish furniture. Slowly, the dated little ranch transformed into something warm and modern, a reflection of both my taste and my hard work. My parents knew I had bought a house. I'd mentioned it offhand during a rare phone call. They never asked for the address, but sometimes I noticed my mother's car crawling down my street, slowing as it passed my driveway. She never stopped, and I never brought it up. Kevin, now in his final year of college, would occasionally text asking for loans. I politely declined each time. His messages never asked about me, only about what I could give him. Month by month, I brought new life into the place. The avocado green kitchen turned into a bright, modern white and gray space. The pink tiled bathroom became a calming retreat. The yard, once overgrown, blossomed into a landscape garden where I loved to spend evenings. Colleagues who visited were stunned at how much value I'd added with my own sweat and labor. For me, it wasn't just equity, it was proof of everything I had built on my own. 1 year after moving in, I decided to host a barbecue. It was partly to celebrate the anniversary and partly to mark the completion of my backyard project. I invited friends, colleagues, mentors, and, against my better judgment, my parents and Kevin. "Are you sure about that?" Lisa asked as she helped me plan. "You've created this beautiful life without them. You don't owe them a front row seat." "They're still family," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. Maybe if they see what I've accomplished, it will change something. The morning of the party, I was up at dawn prepping food, arranging flowers from my own garden, and setting up tables. My nerves buzzed as the clock ticked toward 2 o'clock. By then, my home was immaculate, my yard was glowing, and my closest friends had arrived, ready to celebrate. One by one, guests filtered in. My Aunt Judy and Uncle Mark showed up with a gift, a toolbox, for the homeowner who can fix anything, as Uncle Mark said proudly. Sandra, my mentor, pulled me aside with a glass of champagne. "To smart investments and a bright future," she toasted. In all my years in this business, I've rarely seen someone your age with this kind of clarity. At 3:15, just when I thought they might not come, my parents' luxury SUV pulled into the driveway. My mother stepped out first, her smile tight and calculating. My father followed with a gift bag in hand, and Kevin wandered out last, heading straight to the food table without greeting anyone inside. The bag was a scented candle with the price tag still stuck on the bottom. I thanked them politely, showing them around the house. But instead of pride, my mother offered backhanded compliments. "Oh, you painted these cabinets yourself? Well, I suppose that's one way to save money." Or the bathroom is. Creative, considering the budget. Years of practice kept me smiling, but inside I braced myself. When it came time for me to give a toast, I raised my glass. A year ago today, I got the keys to this house. Many thought it was too ambitious, but with hard work and determination, I made it possible. This home isn't just an investment. It's a symbol that no matter where you start, you can create the life you want. Applause rose from my guests, except from my parents. My mother suddenly scraped back her chair, face flushed with fury. She pointed at me and shouted, "You stole your brother's future." The yard went silent. Even the birds seemed to pause. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I asked, stunned. "This house," she cried. "This neighborhood." We'd been watching this area for years, planning to buy Kevin a property here. "You knew that? You used your insider knowledge to take what was meant for him?" My father nodded beside her. "We were waiting for Kevin to finish college before helping him buy. You took the opportunity we were saving?" I stared at them, then at Kevin, who smirked as if enjoying the scene. My voice shook, but I said firmly, "That's not true. I found this house through my own research. You've never once mentioned buying property for Kevin." "You shouldn't have needed us to mention it," my mother snapped. Any good daughter would have asked her family before making such a selfish move. Kevin chimed in, slurring slightly from the beers he'd already had. "Yeah, sis. As the son, I should have had first pick. That's how it's supposed to be." I looked at the three of them, people who had never lifted a finger to help me, and felt something inside me break. "I think it's time you leave," I said quietly but firmly. "You're choosing this house over your family?" My mother gasped. "No," I answered, my voice steady. "I'm choosing my dignity over your lies. Please go." The silence after my words was deafening. Guests shifted uncomfortably, staring at the ground or at their plates, unsure what to do. My parents gathered themselves with stiff dignity, while Kevin leaned back against the patio table, smirking as if he'd won something. Before they could leave, my Aunt Judy stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Diane, I've held my tongue for years, but this is too much. I've watched you belittle Lucy, ignore her accomplishments, and hand everything to Kevin on a silver platter. And now you dare accuse her of stealing? You should be ashamed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother's face flushed crimson, but she said nothing. My father muttered something about family loyalty, and Kevin just looked away, pretending to be fascinated by his phone. Within minutes, they gathered their things and left, their departure leaving behind a heavy, awkward silence. The rest of my guests, however, stayed. Sandra gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Family dynamics can be messy," she said softly, "but what I saw today wasn't complicated. That was manipulation. Don't let it steal your joy." After everyone had gone home, I sat alone on the patio, staring at the garden lights I'd strung along the fence. My parents' words echoed in my head: stolen future, selfish daughter, house meant for Kevin. I tried to piece it together. Could I have missed something? Had they truly been planning to buy property here? But no matter how I searched my memory, the answer was clear. This was a story they had invented to justify their favoritism. Now that my success was undeniable, the following week, I buried myself in work, determined to shake off the confrontation. But my peace was short-lived. On Wednesday afternoon, I was in the office finalizing paperwork when the receptionist called me to the front. A man in a wrinkled suit stood waiting with a stern expression. He handed me a large envelope and said flatly, "You've been served." Then he turned and walked out. I froze. My coworkers watched curiously as I slipped into a conference room, shut the door, and tore open the envelope. My heart sank. Legal documents stared back at me, stamped and signed. My own parents were suing me. The accusations were absurd. Unjust enrichment, interference with expected inheritance, misappropriation of family opportunity. They claimed I had used insider real estate knowledge to snatch away the very property they had intended for Kevin. The demands were even worse. Either sell my home and give Kevin the profits, or pay them $200,000 to equalize family resources. I stared at their signatures at the bottom of the page, my hands shaking so violently I could hardly hold the papers. My chest tightened and tears blurred my vision. I had worked for everything since I was 16, never asked for a cent from them. And now they were trying to take it all away. That evening, I sat in my car in the office parking garage, sobbing until my throat was raw. When I finally caught my breath, I dialed the only person I knew who would truly understand, Aunt Judy. When I explained what had happened, she exploded. "I did what?" "Lucy, this isn't just dysfunctional, it's delusional." "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "I can't afford a long legal fight. What if I lose my house?" "Listen to me," Aunt Judy said firmly. "You will not lose your home. This lawsuit is a joke. I know someone who can help, Barbara Martinez, one of the best family lawyers I've ever met. I'll call her tonight. You'll meet with her tomorrow." True to her word, the next morning I was sitting across from Barbara in her tidy office, my hands still trembling as I slid the papers across her desk. She adjusted her glasses and scanned the complaint, her brow furrowing deeper with every line. Finally, she set it down and looked at me. In 20 years of practice, she said, "This is one of the most frivolous lawsuits I've ever seen. Unfortunately, frivolous doesn't mean we can ignore it. We'll need to respond formally, and we may even end up in court. The good news is we can countersue for fees and harassment. The bad news is it will cost money up front." When she quoted her retainer, my stomach dropped. It would wipe out a large chunk of my emergency savings, money I had set aside for future renovations. But I didn't hesitate long. "No," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "I fought too hard for this home. I'm not letting them take it. I'll fight." Barbara gave a sharp nod. "Good, then let's get to work." The weeks that followed blurred into a haze of paperwork, sleepless nights, and endless strategy meetings with Barbara. She filed a strong response, denying every baseless allegation and adding a countersuit for defamation, harassment, and recovery of legal fees. The financial strain hit me immediately. Barbara's retainer drained most of my savings, and though I continued to work full-time, the stress affected my performance. I found myself taking on extra clients on weekends to stay ahead. Thankfully, my colleagues at Horizon stepped in. Terry rearranged schedules so I could manage more profitable listings, and Sandra referred several new clients my way. "Family lawsuits are the ugliest kind," Sandra told me gently one evening. "But they end eventually, and you'll be stronger for standing your ground." Still, it was hard to stay strong. Every time I looked at the legal papers, I felt my parents' betrayal all over again. Then came a letter I'll never forget. It was slipped into my office mailbox with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "I thought you should know. Your mother drives by your house nearly every day, sometimes taking pictures. Might be useful to your case. Stay strong. From someone who admires what you've built, The word sent a chill down my spine. Creepy as it was, it confirmed something I had already suspected, and Barbara added it to our growing file of evidence. But the most shocking discoveries came from Barbara's own investigation. Through financial records obtained in discovery, we learned that my parents weren't secretly saving for Kevin's future at all. In fact, they had virtually no savings, just mountains of credit card debt, much of it from funding Kevin's expensive lifestyle. Worse, Barbara uncovered that Kevin himself had run up more than $30,000 in credit card charges using my parents' names while in college. Suddenly, their desperation made sense. The family property they had claimed to be saving for had never existed. It was a fantasy, a promise they had dangled in front of Kevin without the means to make it real. When Barbara explained this to me, her voice was calm but firm. This isn't about property. It's about control. You've built a life that doesn't rely on them, and that threatens the story they've told themselves for years. Her words hit me like a thunderclap. For the first time, I understood this lawsuit wasn't really about the house. It was about power. With renewed determination, I began gathering my own evidence. I dug up every document that proved I had been financially independent since I was 16, pay stubs from my diner job, tax returns filed in my name alone, savings statements, scholarship letters, loan documents, and proof that my mortgage had been approved entirely on my own credit. Barbara compiled testimony from my former employers, professors, and even my bank officers, all willing to confirm that I had never relied on my parents. Aunt Judy, bless her, contributed her own evidence, old photos, family notes, and even a written statement detailing decades of favoritism she had witnessed firsthand. Piece by piece, we built a case so strong it didn't just defend me. It told the true story of my life. As the court date approached, preparation became my second job. Every evening after long hours at Horizon, I sat at my kitchen table with neatly stacked files, organizing years of proof that my life had been built entirely on my own. Pay stubs from Darlene's Diner, my first tax returns filed at 17. Bank statements showing steady deposits and savings, rent receipts from college housing, and the loan application for my mortgage, all in my name. Untouched by my parents, Barbara matched my effort with relentless thoroughness. She gathered letters from my former employers praising my work ethic, testimonies from professors highlighting my academic achievements, and documentation from my mortgage lender confirming I had qualified without a cosigner. Aunt Judy even contributed her own written statement, recalling decades of favoritism and imbalance in our family. Together, we built not just a defense, but a story, the true story of my independence. The discovery process revealed even more damning details. We found evidence that my parents had only started looking at properties in my neighborhood after I had already purchased my home. Their claim of years of planning crumbled instantly. Worse still, we confirmed Kevin's reckless spending, over $30,000 of credit card debt in their names. Suddenly, everything became clear. The lawsuit wasn't about justice. It was a desperate attempt to cover up their financial mess and make me pay for it. When the pretrial hearing arrived, I barely slept the night before. I dressed carefully in a navy suit, studying myself in the mirror. My heart pounded as I walked into the courthouse beside Barbara, who wheeled in a suitcase overflowing with documents. Inside, I saw my parents for the first time since the barbecue. My mother refused to meet my eyes. My father looked both angry and uneasy. Kevin lounged in the back row, scrolling on his phone as though the entire proceeding bored him. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, entered the courtroom with an air of no-nonsense authority. She reviewed the filings, her frown deepening as she read. When my parents' lawyer nervously presented their case, claiming I had stolen, A property opportunity meant for Kevin. The judge interrupted. Are you suggesting, she asked slowly, peering over her glasses, that the defendant was legally obligated not to purchase property in a neighborhood her parents might have been considering for her brother, despite never being informed of this supposed plan? The lawyer stammered. The judge's frown only deepened. When it was Barbara's turn, she didn't waste words. She rolled 3 boxes of evidence to the bench and announced, Your Honor, Box 1 contains complete financial records proving my client's independence since the age of 16. Box 2 includes testimony from educators, employers, and lenders verifying her self-sufficiency. Box 3 contains proof that the plaintiff's claims were fabricated after the fact. Piece by piece, Barbara dismantled every accusation. When I took the stand, my voice shook at first, but soon steadied. I spoke of my years working 2 jobs, of saving every penny, of buying my home through discipline and sacrifice. Barbara guided me through the timeline, and I told my story clearly, letting the documents back up every word. The cross-examination was weak. My parents' lawyer tried to imply I had used family connections, but couldn't name a single example when pressed. Then my mother testified, her voice trembling with practiced emotion about family expectations and a mother's disappointment. Under Barbara's questioning, her story collapsed. You claim to have planned a property purchase for your son for years, Barbara said evenly. Do you have documentation? Investment accounts? Emails? Realtor correspondence? No, my mother admitted, flustered. It was an understanding you never once shared with your daughter. She should have known, my mother insisted weakly. Your Honor, Barbara said dryly, I am not aware of any telepathy requirement under family law. A ripple of muffled laughter passed through the courtroom. Even the judge cracked the faintest smile. My father testified next, and his words only made things worse for their case. Under Barbara's calm but relentless questioning, he admitted that the lawsuit wasn't really about property at all. It was meant to teach Lucy a lesson about family loyalty, he said. The judge's eyebrows shot up at that, her expression stern. His admission revealed exactly what we already knew. This was never about justice. Only control. Then Barbara called Kevin to the stand. My parents' lawyer immediately objected, but the judge overruled. Kevin sauntered up, visibly uncomfortable, and slouched into the witness chair. Mr. Montgomery, Barbara began smoothly. When did your parents first tell you they planned to buy you a house after graduation? Kevin shrugged. I don't know. It was always kind of understood. And yet, Barbara continued, months before your sister purchased her home, you told several friends your parents would be buying you a house in that same neighborhood. How did you know about that neighborhood if no plans were made? Kevin shifted, eyes darting nervously. I just liked the area. So it was your choice, not your parents'? Well, yeah. I told them around Christmas. Barbara's smile was razor sharp. Interesting, Christmas. Months after your sister had already closed on her home. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Kevin slumped back, glaring at Barbara, but unable to refute her point. After nearly 3 hours of testimony, the judge called a recess. I stepped into the hallway with Barbara, my nerves rattling. She gave me a steady look. They have no case. Their own words have undermined everything. Hold firm. When the hearing resumed, my parents' lawyer looked pale and desperate. He pulled Barbara aside for a private discussion. Moments later, she returned with an offer. My parents would drop the lawsuit if I agreed not to pursue legal fees. Barbara left the choice to me. For a moment, I thought about ending it right there, but the anger in my chest burned hotter. They had dragged me through weeks of humiliation, drained my savings, and tried to take my home. I shook my head. No, I want the judge's ruling. And I want my costs covered. Barbara nodded firmly. Then we finish this. The judge returned to the bench, her expression leaving no room for doubt. I've seen enough, she announced. This court finds no merit whatsoever in the plaintiff's claims. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. My knees nearly buckled with relief, but she wasn't done. Removing her glasses, she fixed my parents with a piercing gaze. Furthermore, this court grants the defendant's countermotion for full reimbursement of legal fees. The plaintiff's claims were baseless, a waste of court resources, and a clear attempt to punish their daughter for her success. This behavior is not only shameful, it is unacceptable. For a moment, the courtroom was silent except for the sound of my mother's sharp inhale. My father stared at the floor. Kevin slipped out before the ruling was even finished. Then the judge said something I will never forget. Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery, instead of punishing your daughter, you should learn from her. She has demonstrated extraordinary responsibility and perseverance. That is what true success looks like. When Barbara and I walked out of the courthouse, I finally exhaled fully for the first time in months. She squeezed my shoulder. It's over, she said softly. And for the record, that judge was impressed with you. And my tears pricked my eyes. Thank you for believing in me. Barbara smiled. I didn't just believe you, Lucy. I believed in you. There's a difference. Walking out of that courthouse, I thought the nightmare was finally over. But the days that followed felt strangely hollow. I had won decisively, yet I couldn't shake the ache of what it had cost me. Not just financially, but emotionally. I had finally proven, in black and white, that I was capable of everything they said I wasn't, and still deep down, a part of me mourned the truth I'd tried so long to avoid. My parents would never value me the way I deserved. Back at Horizon, word of the court ruling spread quickly. My colleagues congratulated me warmly, but also respected the heaviness of what I carried. Terry cleared my afternoon schedule the first day I returned. Legal victories and emotional healing don't run on the same clock, she said gently. And she was right. That evening, I came home to an unexpected surprise. My closest friends, Lisa, Sandra, Aunt Judy, Uncle Mark, and a few colleagues showed up at my house with food, wine, and wide-open arms. They filled my little dining room with laughter and warmth, transforming the place that had felt heavy with tension into a safe haven again. Terry handed me an envelope. Inside were printouts of a GoFundMe page my colleagues had set up to help with my legal fees. We raised $8,000, she said softly. Your story struck a chord with people, Lucy. They see your determination, and it inspired them. Tears burned my eyes. But instead of keeping the money, I made a decision right there. I can't take this. The judge awarded me legal fees. Once those are paid, my costs will be covered. I want this money to help others like me, kids who are on their own, working hard but needing a little boost. And just like that, the Self-Made Scholars Fund was born. With the GoFundMe as seed money and later contributions from others who resonated with my story, the fund began awarding scholarships to young people supporting themselves, determined to build a future with little or no family help. Meanwhile, I drafted a letter to my parents. It wasn't emotional, it was direct. I outlined clear boundaries, respect for my independence, acknowledgement of the harm they had caused, and a willingness to attend family therapy if they wanted any kind of relationship with me. I mailed it certified, but I expected nothing. My energy was no longer focused on waiting for them to change. Instead, I turned inward. I found a therapist, Dr. Winslow, who specialized in family trauma. She helped me unravel patterns I had normalized: favoritism, manipulation, silence in the face of cruelty. She told me something I carry with me still. Your strength doesn't erase your pain, Lucy. Both can exist together. And acknowledging one doesn't diminish the other. For 3 months, I had no contact with my immediate family. And for the first time in years, I felt light. During that quiet season, I reconnected with relatives who had distanced themselves long ago. Over coffee and long phone calls, I learned truths I hadn't known before. My Aunt Judy explained, "Your mother has always defined her worth through appearances. When you stopped playing her game, she saw it as defiance." Kevin was her ticket to the status she craved, so she poured everything into him. It wasn't an excuse, but it was context. And somehow that context made me feel freer. I couldn't change them, but I could change how much power I gave them over my life. My professional world, meanwhile, flourished. The energy I had spent defending myself was now funneled back into my career. I was promoted to senior agent at Horizon, leading a team of younger agents. I also started writing a blog about financial independence, at first anonymously, then under my own name. The blog connected me with people around the world who had felt the same isolation I once did. Slowly, the story I thought was about loss became one of expansion, of building something larger than myself. 5 months after the lawsuit ended, I received a letter that made my stomach clench. It came from an attorney's office I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I opened it, bracing for another attack. But instead of threats, the letter was a formal inquiry. Kevin had graduated, was struggling to find work, and my parents wanted to know if I might consider employing him at Horizon. I sat there staring at the paper, torn between disbelief and laughter. After everything they had put me through, they were now asking me to bail out the very son who had been handed every advantage. My answer was short and firm. I declined. 6 months after the trial, another unexpected letter arrived, this time handwritten. It was from my father. His tone was nothing like the self-assured, dismissive man I'd known growing up. His words were halting, humble. "I've had time to reflect," he wrote. "I realize now how much hurt we caused you. Your mother still struggles to admit it, but I can no longer pretend what we did was right. I can't undo the past, but if you're willing, I would like to meet. Just the two of us." I brought the letter to Dr. Winslow, my therapist. After a long discussion, I agreed to meet him in a neutral setting, a small coffee shop. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. The commanding man of my childhood looked smaller, quieter, worn down by life. He fumbled with his words. "Lucy, I don't even know where to start." "The truth would be a good place," I replied. For the first time, he told me things I had never known. He admitted that my mother's obsession with Kevin came from her own childhood fears, a belief that sons guaranteed security, while daughters were expendable. He confessed they had overextended themselves financially for years, clinging to appearances and pouring money into Kevin's lifestyle to uphold an illusion. "It was never about you lacking worth," he said. "It was about our fears and failings." He also revealed that after the lawsuit, my mother had begun therapy herself, reluctantly but sincerely. Kevin, meanwhile, had moved out of state for an entry-level job and was finally experiencing life without their constant financial safety net. I listened carefully but made my boundaries clear. If there's to be any relationship moving forward, it has to be built on honesty, respect, and therapy. I won't compromise on that. He nodded, acknowledging the conditions without protest. The path forward was anything but easy. My mother initially refused family therapy, claiming she didn't need it. But eventually, she agreed when she realized I would not bend. Our first session was tense, her arms crossed, her voice defensive. "I thought I was pushing you to be your best," she said. "No," I answered calmly. "You were pushing me to disappear." It was painful, but necessary. Over time, she softened slightly. While she never managed a full apology, her behavior changed. My father, meanwhile, made real efforts to connect. Small questions about my work, genuine interest in my projects. The most surprising shift came from Kevin. Months into his new job, he called me unexpectedly. His voice was awkward but uncharacteristically humble. "I don't know how you did it, Lucy. I never realized how much mom and dad were doing for me until it stopped. I'm drowning. Could you maybe teach me about budgeting? About how to do this on my own?" I didn't offer money, but I did offer guidance. I explained credit, budgeting, and the reality of living within one's means. For the first time, our relationship was based not on resentment, but on mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, and never would be, but it was something. 1 year after the lawsuit, I hosted another barbecue, but this one was nothing like the disaster of the year before. This time, only my chosen family and the people who had stood by me received invitations. Friends, mentors, colleagues, and the few relatives who had always treated me with respect. The atmosphere was completely different. Laughter carried across the yard, the scent of food filled the air, and instead of judgment, I was surrounded by genuine pride and warmth. Sandra raised her glass in a toast to Lucy, who taught us all that the most valuable inheritance isn't what's handed down, it's what you create for yourself. As the sun set over the garden I had planted with my own hands, I realized how stark the contrast was. The year before, I'd been humiliated in front of family who had tried to strip away everything I'd worked for. Now I was standing in the same backyard, but with people who truly value me, not for what I could give them, but for who I was. In the 2 years that followed, my life blossomed. The Self-Made Scholars Fund grew, providing scholarships to 12 students who, like me, were building their futures without family support. My blog on financial independence expanded into a full online resource hub. Eventually, I was invited to speak at local schools, sharing my journey and teaching practical financial skills to students who needed to hear that. Self-sufficiency was possible. The work energized me. I no longer saw my past only as pain. It had become the foundation for helping others. My story resonated with young people who felt overlooked, unseen, or unsupported. And each time I spoke, I reminded them, your worth is not defined by the people who fail to see it. You can build something beautiful on your own terms. As for my family, our relationship remained complicated. My parents eventually agreed to attend therapy sessions, though my mother never truly apologized. Instead, her behavior slowly shifted. Small signs of effort appeared, fewer cutting remarks, more attempts to listen. My father, though flawed, showed genuine interest at times, asking about my work with a curiosity I had never seen before. Kevin, to my surprise, grew the most. Our conversations, once filled with arrogance and entitlement, became tentative steps toward mutual understanding. He admitted how difficult life had been without constant handouts, and even asked me for advice on managing money. I didn't give him financial support, but I shared knowledge, guiding him toward independence. Our bond would never be close, but it became something new, respect instead of rivalry. Through it all, I held my boundaries firm. I had stopped needing their approval, and that made all the difference. 2 years after the lawsuit, my life looked nothing like the one my parents had once tried to script for me. My career had soared, my scholarship fund was thriving, and my blog had grown into a platform helping thousands of young people learn what I had once taught myself the hard way, how to build a future when no one else is investing in you. Occasionally, I still cross paths with my parents. Our contact was limited to carefully defined boundaries, mostly at family gatherings where civility replaced warmth. They would never be the supportive parents I once wished for, but I no longer needed them to be. My self-worth was no longer tied to their approval. It was rooted in the life I had created for myself. Kevin and I maintained a cautious, practical relationship. He often reached out for advice on managing money or handling the realities of adulthood. For the first time, our conversations weren't about what I owed him, but about what he was finally learning for himself. While we would never be particularly close, respect replaced resentment, and that felt like progress. One evening, I hosted yet another barbecue, this time surrounded only by my chosen family, the people who had stood by me when everything fell apart. Lisa laughed as she helped set the table. Sandra toasted to the power of building your own foundation. Aunt Judy hugged me tightly, pride shining in her eyes as I looked around at the smiling faces under the soft glow of my backyard lights. I realized something profound. My greatest inheritance wasn't money, property, or approval. It was the strength I had forged in the fire of rejection and favoritism. It was the life I had built brick by brick, on my own terms. To anyone listening who has ever been overlooked, dismissed, or told you weren't enough, remember this. Your worth is not defined by the people who failed to see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is believe in yourself enough to keep going, even when no one else believes in you. So build slowly, steadily, one brick at a time. The road won't be easy, but every step forward is yours, and no one can take that away. I'm Lucy, and this is my story. I built my future piece by piece, and if I can do it, so can you.